Miserable prick.
And it's a happy welcome to the Sportsfan Radio panel, because the professor's called order in the pre-match warm-up and got us moving because we had to get to air for the viewers. Now, let's start with tennis. And Cooter, I'm going to throw to you immediately. Have you ever seen a better exhibition of racket breaking than by Alexander Bublik?
Professor, I probably disagree a little bit. I think we've seen our own Aussie Nick Kyrgios go into a rant, and he actually got fined, significant fine. A fine, 22,500, probably not too significant for a tennis player that's earning millions, but I can't find anywhere where Alexander Bublik received a fine. Obviously received a code violation, but he only received one code violation. So you got your money's worth by smashing 3 rackets. Now, the worst part of it, Professor, was that he smashed a racket on court and then left it on court and walked off. So we would have got a ball kid, who now probably is called a racket kid, to actually come and pick it up and put it on his bag. How he wasn't defaulted is beyond me.
Tell us what happened. I mean, we've seen it, but tell us what happened and the context in which it happened.
So he'd won the first set, lost the second, and then there was a tiebreaker in the third set, and he was down 5-0. And obviously it's first to 7 by 2 points. And he's played an okay point at 5-love down and tried to hit a drop shot, and it's probably just reached the net, and then he's gone ballistic, absolutely ballistic, smashed a racket, left it on court, and the commentary sort of thought, well, that's it. He's sort of got his anger out. He's got plenty of rackets left to go. He then walked to his tennis bag, got one out. That got disintegrated. And he thought, well, I'm still a bit angry, so I'll get another one out, and absolutely chopped the living out of that one as well. Then picked the racket up, walked around, lost the point, walked off court, and he lost. So...
Couple of points, Cooter. It was the first round of a tournament that he won the previous year. So I imagine he was expecting to do a little bit better. Secondly, it is not a Grand Slam. The tournament is not something that most people would have heard about. So that's a bit more context, I think. But who is Alexander Bublik?
Where
is he ranked?
He's in the 50s. The issue you've got... is that he would have had significant ranking points on it. Now, the back end of that obviously means that by not being able to defend those points, he'll lose those and probably drop his ranking from 50, whatever it was, the world number 50, sorry. So maybe that's what it is. But I think the issues came from serving double faults. And in the match, he served 14. And, well...
Interesting, Cooter. He's described as he plays unpredictable shots and, in particular, an underarm serve. And he has a bad temper. Does that remind you of anybody?
My parents would probably say myself. Yeah, mum and dad would probably say myself. But at the same time...
underarm serve?
I did do, I've done some in my career over the years, but no, it's only it's just a shocking look. But to not be able to find where he got fined or suspended, like, how do you not get a suspension? Like, it comes back to, and we've talked about it previously on the show, is the treatment that the tennis players receive and the pedestal that they're put up on. Now, he should be suspended from playing for tournaments. Now, if he got fined, we can't find it, so I assume he would have got some fine or sanction. But what's that do when you're earning millions of dollars a year?
Cooter, the umpire waited till he'd finished his third smashing before pronouncing warning. Now, I would have thought after the first racket smash, and it really was a very violent smash on the court, something would have happened at that time. I would have thought the shock was so great. You say you're out of it. You're out of the game here.
Well, maybe the umpire was concerned for their own well-being. He may have just tipped him right off if he had got a code violation at the time of the first racket, and he may have received a Yonex. Like, surely Yonex couldn't be happy, could they? Like,
oh, hang on, you just mentioned Yonex, Kuda, so it's that's no publicity is bad publicity, I reckon.
Can you imagine Yonex when they watch Kyrgios and imagine Kyrgios and Bublik playing, and both sponsored by Yonex? I'll tell you what, the front row ball boys or the front row spectators might end up with a broken racket by the end of the day.
No, because before the game, there'd be demonstrations on TV about the volatility of the two players and rackets being smashed galore. All the 15-year-old kid thinks is, oh, Yonex. What are they going for?
But what sort of message are they sending by smashing rackets to the kids that we know are pretty, who look at these people and think that they're demigods sort of thing? I just thought, when I saw it, I just thought this is rubbish. But then when he didn't pick the racket up, wasn't defaulted, and then what I could see wasn't fined, I thought, what's happening to the sport? Like,
to change the facts, it's now a US Open final, and Serena Williams does that.
Her opponent might get a default.
A bit different. If that had happened there, it'd be hell to pay. Oh. But at a lower tournaments, doesn't seem to be the case, despite the fact it's an ATP sanctioned event.
Well, it's off Broadway a little bit, isn't it? It was.
Well, yeah.
Where was it? It was
Montpellier, France.
Oh, in France. Oh, the French are they're a bit more liberal, aren't they, around when it comes to tennis and being able to smoke in the stands and boo opponents and stuff like that. So, but no, I was staggered by it, and I just thought that to receive nothing, I thought it was just a horrible look on the back of obviously what we saw at the Australian Open, a pretty good tournament to finish, the completion of the Australian Open. I was staggered, absolutely staggered. So, but again, is that the ATP? What's the other tour that Novak's got? Well, maybe they'd be a bit harsher when it comes to racket breaking.
Professor, it's interesting that his trajectory's gone from Russia, where he didn't think he was looked after enough, to Kazakhstan, which, as we know, is enticing good tennis players to that country, and lives in Monte Carlo. So he's just sort of got that, I don't know, can I use the word privileged sort of thing going on, where he thinks it's quite okay to behave like that.
So a question for you, Judge, and somebody who's got a background in penalties. So for a first offence under the code, it's a code violation. For a second offence, it's a point penalty. For a third offence, it's a match default. What are your thoughts on if the umpire had have wanted to, it's a code violation after the first racket, it's a point penalty after the second racket, and then you just defaulted after the third racket? That'd get people paying attention, wouldn't it?
Well, it's a classic case of exactly that. If you'd done them 5 minutes apart, Professor, I would have thought he was out of the match. The fact that they are sequential, you know the expression continuing offence, it's not a continuing offence. They're three separate offences leading to I would have defaulted him.
Well, the other thing obviously would have been if he gets the code violation for the first racket, gets a code violation for the second racket, he doesn't need to walk around the neck because the match is over. So just a nutcase, a nutcase. But
at that point in the game, you're right, Kurt, it would have been the game over.
No, he should have been defaulted, but at the end of the day, maybe it was the lesser of two evils that he had to walk around the net and then copy his just desserts by losing 7-11 in a tiebreaker.
I think the bottom line is, Professor, that these rules, code violations rules, need to be fixed up, strengthened, and actually applied, which I don't think happened in this case.
Is the big issue, though, that professional tennis players at the top level are prima donnas. So we talk often about the players that are sort of those ones that make the first round of a Grand Slam, they get about 190,000, I think, off the top of my head. That sets them up for the year. Whereas when we watch people like your Sissipasses and these sorts of people, is that they break rackets and they do, I don't know, they just get royal treatment because obviously they're the stars of the tournament. And that reflects in the way I think that they carry on with the way they play and conduct themselves.
Well, it's interesting, Cooter, in our lifetime, well, certainly my lifetime, what I call the golden era of tennis, you can call it an old folk, I don't care, but tennis was really highly regarded in the day, highly respected, and Australians just, in awe of the players. The top players weren't being paid. I forget for how many years it was until the Kramer tour, but up until then, you had to be an amateur. So for many years, there was no money. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, and that is in fact not a good thing. But gee, I think it's moving too far in the other direction there. We expect nothing from our players.
Gelding?
David, just talking like the Australian Open, there was some fantastic tennis played, and it was really, really good. But is it becoming a bit like the Spring Carnival in Melbourne, where I saw more in the papers about celebrities attending the tents or the champagne area and things like that? And is it becoming too expensive for normal people to see? Like, I think the men's tickets for the final, if you could get one, was about $250 to $300, and that's just one of the back ones, not the prime ones for Target. But yeah, there was just more. I'm a celebrity. Get me to the Open.
Well, I think, have we caught up since the final? No.
No.
The men's final, I thought, was a significant disappointment. Congratulations to Djokovic beating Tsitsipas. I thought it was a pretty ordinary final. The women's final we talked about.
Did it easy, yeah.
But yeah, like maybe it was because we didn't have the star power there this year with the Kyrgios or Kokkinakis going deep. The price of the price of entry is significant to go and watch it.
And they got a fantastic crowd for the final.
The crowds were huge going with the passes or the ground passes.
The day passes, yep.
And the prices of those now obviously have gone up significantly as well. So I think the first Saturday was $79 a ground pass to get in.
Wow.
And $75 the Friday. So,
and of course, that doesn't get you into the stadium.
No, you can get it. The only one you can really get into is Kia Arena. Sorry, you can get into Kia Arena and John Cain.
But not in the last week, I don't think.
Well, there's not much on the last week on this. So it's certainly changed over the years. The presentations and the speeches were interesting. I didn't hear Craig Tiley's name mentioned as much as what it has been in prior years. And you'll note that the chair of Tennis Australia didn't thank Craig Tiley this year.
Is she engaged to Rod Laver?
Well, she's got a tighter tag than Mick Gayfer ever put on a footballer, that's for sure. But she was torn in the last week because the Prime Minister spent a lot of time at the tennis. And so she had to choose whether she went Rod Laver or she went Anthony Albanese. So the one that, if we want to talk
Rod Laver will always be there. Albanese may be out eventually.
That's right. The one that I love, Judge, and he's Ken Rosewall, and how understated he is, and he's just an icon of Australian sport, but doesn't get the credit or doesn't seek it as much as what Rod Laver does.
It's interesting, Cooter. I mean, Ken Rosewall's virtually, I think, an unknown in Australian tennis, Australian sport. Those who remember him, remember he was the most enduring player. He was playing in Grand Slam finals at 42. Back in the day, again, this is the era I'm talking about, where pay was virtually non-existent. And from all accounts, I don't know him, but all accounts, a lovely man. So it's interesting that the emphasis is not more on him. So there, I agree with you.
Just going back to your point, Gelding, and I just wanted to take this up with both Cooter and John. that the tennis is becoming a little bit like the spring carnival, I went into a local coffee shop and just making, a bit of small chat with the person behind the counter, and they were going to the tennis on the Friday before the finals, so in the second week, ground pass. And I said, "Oh yeah, what are you going to do?" "Oh no, we're just going to go and sit and watch it on the TV and have a few drinks and we'll do that all afternoon and then we'll go home." And I thought, well, it's certainly changed, because being an old timer, when you had your ticket to go to the tennis, you're actually going to watch a match. You weren't going to do anything else. Now we've got a whole subset of people, spectators, who aren't actually particularly going to watch a live match. They're just going to be there and soak up the activity and what's going on. Now, that completely changes the makeup of how I see going to the tennis. And not only that, it gives the Australian Open and all the other Opens an extra income stream, because now people are satisfied to go to a venue and not actually watch a game live.
So
it's an experience with tennis thrown in, Professor. Where it used to be it was tennis with a bit of bread and circuses going on around, but now it's the experience which counts, which fits totally into the TikTok generation, which is all about giving the experience.
Well, you just had to look at the men's final and see all the people out in Garden Square with all the Serbian flags and all that. I think it's $20 entry to get a ground pass for the final days or whatever it is. So you get to sit out there, watch a big screen, celebrate, probably light some flares, and then pay $15 a beer. Now, maybe it's good atmosphere, I don't know. Certainly doesn't tickle my fancy, that's for sure. But it's called the People's Tournament, isn't it? I think Craig Tiley's tagged as that. And I'd be fascinated, Professor, to see the results or the financial results of Tennis Australia out of the back of this. Is that obviously they lost a significant amount of money at the back end of this, the back end of COVID, for the 2 years. So the tournament had the highest crowd it's ever had. Now, that doesn't mean that's ground passes, that's attendance on main courts, et cetera. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then obviously the flow on effect of, like, something that wasn't talked about through the whole tournament was where Australian women are positioned at the moment. Obviously we had Ash Barty, number one in the world, Grand Slam winner. We had Isla Tomljanovic, who didn't play at the tournament, and our next best ranked participant, I think, was 168 in the world.
Peter, why don't we care anymore? Because you and I worry about it, but I don't think most Australians, A, know that, and B, care.
I think there'll be an announcement around a high performance academy coming up shortly, Judge, which
Good.
Always known's worked well. We've loved what the Australian Institute of Sport did for our athletes in Canberra. And as taxpayers, obviously, we want to see the performance of these people. So stay tuned for that. It'll be an announcement, and hopefully it can help drive our next generation.
Well, Judge, we care 12 months a year. I think most Australians only care about where our women are situated 4 times a year.
I think that's right, Professor. I was just musing, just listen to you, Curta, about the experience event, what Gelding was saying. Just imagine if there was a Ukrainian versus a Russian in the final. It'll all be just all this faux publicity about, the war and all the rest of it. Take it back to 1956, Professor, Olympic Games, the water polo.
Hungary versus Russia.
Hungary versus Russia. The blood in the water tournament. They actually belted the suitcase out of them. That's real war. That's reality. Now these days it's just all faux. It's all put up. It's all, I don't know, manufactured for television. Can I put it that way?
Well, the last part, Professor, is has Tony Jones outlived his welcome as a broadcast host?
Are you asking us for the?
I'm just saying that I watched the coverage, and James Bracey, Todd Woodbridge, a couple of the girls from Sydney who hosted. There's none of these crappy in-jokes and sort of trying to be funny. We don't need that rubbish. What we want is want hosting for a brilliant event, and then let the tennis do it talking, and the players. Like, I still think the interview after the match where they have to walk through, where they do the lap of, I think they do the lap of Margaret Court with the cup or trophy. They then walk through the Channel 9 studio, and they do an interview within the 15 minutes, 20 minutes after receiving the cup. It's brilliant. It's made for TV, that stuff, but not the crappy in-jokes.
Yep, I totally agree.
Yeah. All right, Judge, I'm going to put this one fairly and squarely at you. News during the week that there's going to be $65 million spent on UTAS Stadium in Launceston for 1,000 new spectators, and just to go with the experience, they're going to have a plaza as well. Good news?
Well, it's news, Professor. It's the latest announcement coming out of that beleaguered state, Tasmania. But how many announcements can we put up with? It's 65 million for Launceston. Does that mean the Hobart Stadium is not going to happen? Does it mean the Blundstone Arena is not going to be fixed up? It just adds to the melange of ridiculous news, I think, Professor, that's coming out of Tasmania, all supporting unfortunately, my view, which is that the AFL doesn't want a 19th team. It's too hard. They don't have a leader. They have a lame duck leader in Gill. They have a commission that is anonymous, led by a fellow in West Australia who wouldn't know where Tasmania is. It's just becoming one announcement after another. I'm just thinking it's another picture, it's another picture of a stadium with a roof on the top of it. So what they've done is they've got the Launceston Oval, and they've put a picture of a stadium. It's like that so-called $750 million roof stadium in Hobart. I was thinking, what does it cost to actually draw one of those things? Get an architect to draw it. I don't know, 5 or 10 grand, stick that in front of the public. So here's a $65 million announcement, which will never be paid. And it all depends upon the federal government kicking in $65 million. And the Premier says, I've had productive discussions with Anthony Albanese. I mean, really, do we believe any of this?
Jackie Lambie would be right behind it.
I haven't heard of Jackie Lambie. It's interesting, Gelling.
Well, she's got an opinion on everything, hasn't she?
I mean, the fact she hasn't got an opinion on this makes you wonder whether it's actually a goer. I think it's sad, Professor, because this program has been a great supporter of the concept of a Tasmanian team, but like most things the AFL does now, they're stuffing the whole thing up.
Well,
that's
Judge,
my opinion.
Yeah, Judge, I did a bit of digging, and although they've announced the 65 million, that's for the first stage.
Yes.
They plan to spend 200 million on upgrading that stadium. Now, if you're building a $750 million stadium in Hobart, just down the road.
It's now $1 billion, by the way.
Oh, $1 billion. All right. Well, if you're building $1 billion stadium just down the road, why are you continuing to spend a lot of money upgrading Launceston, where I wouldn't imagine AFL games will be played if the new stadium is built?
Professor, the new stadium won't be built. Let's just agree on that. And I think what seems fairly obvious is that what they're going to do is upgrade the two existing stadia, which are about 19,000 thereabouts. The new one, which will never exist, is 23,000. We'll upgrade them by 2,000 or 3,000 and continue to have the north and south. I don't think we appreciate the north and south divide as much as Tasmanians do, and I think they'd be more than happy to split the team between those two grounds, because otherwise this is going to be a horrible story, I think, once it loses so much money, because they're saying that over 20 years, this is the experts, not the Premier, it'll lose $300 million. Now, does Tasmania want that? Does the football team want that? With the always bleeding money, always going to the AFL saying, look, we're down another 15 million this year. I think it's got mud written all over it. I'd rather kept the money, upgraded the 2 existing stadia and got on with
it. John, is it a lot to do, and Professor and Dave, please put your view on, is it this divide in Tasmania, South, where should the home be? We're in Launceston, we won't travel down to Hobart.
Yep.
Tasmanian football seems to be divided south and north. Is it more about that than?
I think it's a lot to do with. I think it's a lot to do with gelding. And bearing in mind, Tasmania's only got 500,000 people. The state has got to be totally behind this team, otherwise it's not going to work. Now, GWS, the big thing there is GWS has got 3 million people or whatever the population is, and Greater Western Sydney.
But only 30 go to the games.
Yeah. No one goes to the games there because they don't like the game. But in Tasmania, that rivalry, I think, is fairly strident.
Very much so.
The thing with Tasmania is, haven't they just announced have they extended their contract for 3 years, Judge?
Well, that's part of it, Cooter, that they contemporaneously made that announcement. But that, of course, is dependent upon, a 19th team coming in, whether there's 65 million is going to be paid, whether stage 2. That's why I say they're announcements, but they're just distractions from the real game. And another distraction is that Martin Pakula, the ex-Victorian Sports Minister, has now become an advisor, professor, 1 day a week on major projects. What are major projects other than a 19th team and a stadium? This is just getting...
And isn't he on the Hawthorn board?
No.
Sure? I think he got on the Hawthorn board because half the problem, on the board level was that there was Kennett saying, the Liberal, and Kennett making the joke that now that Martin is on board, he can go to Dan to get some money for Hawthorn for the Dingley project. So wouldn't that be a bit of a conflict if he was on a board?
James Molino.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I knew it was one of them, but James Molino is the man that you're thinking of, which again, blows the mind. But having been to Tasmania for the football, Judge, we've been across a few times now, is that you fly into Launceston and you probably stay for 3 days, play golf, go to the footy, and it is genuinely a good weekend, and the same with Hobart. But it's interesting that I know we've talked about it before, but we shouldn't compare them. Is the success that the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers have had?
Yep. I think it's a good analogy.
Their games are sold out. Now, the games are sold out, obviously, because of the size of the stadium that they're currently in. Now, they're looking to increase the stadium size. Now, obviously, the team is owned by Larry Kesselman, who owns the NBL itself. But they've been a success because they've started not as this $26,000 seat stadium. They've actually gone into a stadium that's, I hate the word boutique, but it's a stadium that creates atmosphere, it creates sellouts. And the thing is, they've got a team that they can now associate with. And the team plays, I would think, the way Tasmanian people would want a team to play, that they never give up. And the Jack Jumpers, remember, Professor, when the Jack Jumpers first came in and everyone's bagging their name and saying, what the hell is a Jack Jumper? They're not thinking that now, are they?
No, well, they're doing very well, aren't they?
Across the board, sponsorship, numbers attending, the players that they've got. They've made the playoffs both years. Is AFL, have they missed the trick? I don't know the answer to that, but it just seems that we're going to talk about this for not months. We're going to be talking about this for years because the AFL just won't. I think they'll commission another report, Judge, and maybe Martin from Carlton might be the man to do that report.
I definitely think there'll be more reports. There's no question about that. But of course, McLaughlin's leaving. He is leaving eventually, and I think they have to announce appointment by, is it April? Now we know he's the guy. Well, I think he's the guy in the room next door, Andrew Dillon. Assuming that's the case, well, what's he saying? Otherwise, if there's nothing coming from the AFL before Gill goes, this thing is a dead duck.
Well, Judge, at the moment, I don't think we'll be hearing from Gill for about a week or so because he's currently on tour.
Yes, the grand tour that leads to the Super Box, in the NFL.
Seriously?
Yep, Super Bowl. He's, I think it's funded by the AFL as well.
Well, it'd be a fact-finding mission, wouldn't it, Judge? Like, you going to find out how premier sporting events are run.
Exactly what you do, Professor, in your last month of your tenure, is to go and see how other sports do it.
How do you spell junket?
Gill. But the other thing, obviously, Professor, is that during the week, and we all love our AFLW, is that I believe there was a meeting of coaches or club managers or general managers to talk about the upcoming season.
The AFL season?
No, I think the AFLW season was talked about this week.
Geez, you wouldn't know it from the newspapers or the media. All they're doing is asking a question: when is the season going to start, or when's the draft period, or when's trade period?
Well, they've talked about these people that are getting picked up in the supplementary preseason draft. They've talked about who will be the best player in 2025. The coverage of AFL, we just want the season to start because we can't deal with all the crap that they're talking about at the moment. So the disappointing thing, though, is that we had a brilliant AFLW season. We had a great end to it when you look at the crowds and the teams that are involved. And here we are back again talking about rubbish at the end of the day. The AFL, they just publish stuff. And Gelding, the best part about this week's been the celebration of the 10 years of the Essendon 34.
Yeah, look, we've had some interesting reading. Isn't it great it keeps coming up?
Well, I just think it's great.
When is Mark Robinson going to stop pushing for Hurdy to be coach again? Like, I read his article. I started to read it during the week and just stopped and just said, this is so biased and directed in one way that it's just, if I was David Evans, I'd think about suing him, wouldn't you? You'd be going to see a lawyer.
Well, there was an article a day on Essendon 34 this week and 10-year anniversary of it, and the fallout and where the players are now. Like there's a song from the musical Frozen called "Let It Go."
Yeah, but most of the players have moved on, have got good positions and good jobs. It just seems to be kind of the major players, of Hurd, Thompson, Evans, Sheedy, yeah.
But, all right, gentlemen, let's. How about we move on? And I see a photo or a picture up there of somebody who's being exceptionally quiet. Paul Deligan, welcome back from the depths of India. You didn't stay for the cricket? What? You're not like Gill. You can't stick around you couldn't have stuck around for an extra few days?
No, I was tempted, but given that almost everyone at the visa section had a submachine gun, I probably don't think they'd take too kindly to overstaying your welcome. But I did have to bolt home via the facilities without getting too graphic. I'm 5 kilos lighter, put it this way, than I was last time on air. So it was a great trip, but I did eat the wrong thing on the street.
Was it a trip or a junket?
I paid for it, but that was at the end of the trip. So, I'm still
Was it a junket or was it a trip?
No, I don't know what you mean by that word junket. It was business related. Judge would like, I met a former New Zealand High Court Justice there. Had a couple of beers with him and plenty of law firms there. The country will eclipse China in not too many years. The economy is booming. The legal industry is in its infancy. in terms of insolvency. So it was good to get there and hand out a few business cards and shake a few hands.
Well,
It sounded like a junket, David, isn't it?
Well, I certainly saw some LinkedIn pictures of the giraffe, which makes it official. Which makes it work official. When it's on LinkedIn, I'd say it as being work official because...
Is it one of those things where you go to a big room, sign in, and then piss off and go out and do whatever you want?
Well, we did have a spare day. I got to the Taj Mahal and just a bit of non-sporting trivia. There was a tribute to his wife who died giving birth to their 14th child. And I said to the very serious tour guide, I said, she deserved a bit more than this little shack. I'm sorry. Yeah, just obviously the humour didn't work there. It might not work here either, but so it was a good trip.
All right, Paul, let's whip onto the NRL now. Tell me this: when was the last time two people were arrested for having a cuddle?
Yeah, or some say wrestle. What was that saying? Nothing good happens after midnight. I think nothing good happens at 3:45 a.m. either. They were just two cousins having a wrestle at 4 a.m. We've all done it. That was their defence. Well, what was almost painted in a positive light, I think ScoMo might be back in town because it was painted as Jack Whiten sticking up for his friend. That was the reason that Whiten ended up in the police cell, because he didn't want his friend there alone. So that was quite a noble gesture from Jack. Apparently Latrell resisted arrest, allegedly. So it is quite an unusual story, but I'm just happy that it's two of their own, like when the Mafia take each other out. It wasn't anyone from the public. It was just two footballers having a bit of a wrestle, or you say cuddle there, Professor.
Well, when the two of them were asked about it, they said we were just having a bit of fun in Canberra.
Yep. Well, it sounds like Wayne Carey when he was in that golf cart and the woman had a bleeding face. We were just mucking around. I don't know how that happens, but anyway, this is a lot less serious than that. It doesn't seem that there's going to be too many repercussions of it all. They're both back in action. They'll be ready to go, and it's without downplaying. It's obviously not a good look for the code.
I thought that Paul, that when you're in Canberra, that there's an embargo on any media recording or anything like that. Mr. Tudge and certain other, or allegedly, sorry, I should use allegedly, of course.
Yeah.
These people that when you go to bars that you're not allowed to be recorded. That's obviously not the case when you're a rugby league player.
Well, I think it was on the street, so I don't know if the actual embrace was indoors or outdoors, but I do know when I went there, I went to apparently the busiest part of Canberra, and they were putting the chairs up at the restaurant at 8 p.m. So maybe they were setting up for breakfast and they were getting a bit annoyed that the boys were making a bit of a fuss while they got the bacon and egg rolls ready. But I would much rather talk, with all respect, Professor, about the Indigenous game and Maori game. That was spine-tingling, and that was just before the match started with the two cultures on display. It wasn't a Mickey Mouse trial game like some others have been. You saw two cultures there. And you saw a great thing about rugby league, the way it can unite cultures, people and countries.
And Paul, you're referring to both matches that were played yesterday at Rotorua.
Yes.
Obviously, Professor, the women's has played before it. And the men's, one of the male players was interviewed and he was blown away by the crowd arriving so early to watch the women's play. But that was a great standard, Paul. Yeah. If that's a promotion for the NRL going forward, it's just top shelf rugby.
But that is the good thing about the rugby league and their practice games and things like that. These people take so much pride in representing the Aboriginals and the Maoris, and they play proper rugby. And I think the NRL are on a real winner there and miles in front of a lot of other leagues in the way that they run these trial games, because they are very serious games, and sometimes, not saying they don't play better in them, Paul, but they seem to take a lot of pride in performing well in these games.
Yeah, and I think Kuda made a good point. The AFL seems adverse to tying the two games together. They're wanting a standalone women's product, but you've got to build it first. And if you can show me any harm to the women's game yesterday by aligning it with the men's game, then I'm not here. It was a good concept. You build it up. Perhaps it can stand alone. Perhaps it doesn't need to, because that was a great spectacle of rugby league. And as you say, seeing the fans arrive early for that and seeing the women go about it the way they did, it really was a great ad for rugby league.
Well, I think is the women's game in New Zealand advanced? Is it fairly sophisticated? Because it must be to have the spectacle which they put on.
It's not part of the NRL women's game as such, but they do have their own competition there, and you can see there's a high level of participation just by the standard of player. But a lot of the players were part of the NRL competition. I'm just checking to see. I'm pretty sure that the Warriors are on the chalkboard to come in for the women's game. But it really was a good ad for the game. And the men's game, I mean, Selwyn Cobbo, you could already mark him down as a possible best player in the game. He was just phenomenal for the Aboriginal team, and it was a good standard all round.
The Selwyn Cobbo, you mentioned Selwyn. Latrell put a ball on his left nipple and he dropped it, and you could see his head go down. But the way the players got around him, and I think he's an emotional player, Paul, Selwyn, which we can all associate with as watching a sport. But he's an absolute jet. He's someone that you actually would go to. You'd pay your money to go and watch it, the rugby league. Another
star that I like, Nico Hines at the back. He's had a fair sort of week. His mum's on trial for drug charges. I'm not sure of connection with his father, but the coach for the Indigenous team said that he speaks to everyone the same, which is always a rarity. He's always got time for everyone, almost Shane Warne-esque. He's always got time for everyone and inspires all of those around him. So Nico Hines really is an ambassador for the game and the Aboriginal community. It's another feel-good story coming out of that match. He was exceptional playing at fullback when he's playing halfback for the Sharks. So to change positions and own it against some of the best in the game shows that Nico Hines would be in the top 10 players in the game, minimum.
Well, Paul, he's the current Dally M winner, so he'd be top 5 in the game, I would have thought. Obviously came through Melbourne Storm and was sort of not frozen out a little bit, but wasn't the fullback. So the positions that he wanted to play probably weren't available for him. So you look at it, you go halfback, Jerome Hughes, fullback, Ryan Pappenhausen, and he came off the bench and he was always an impact player, but he was always one of the most popular players at the club, and that was amongst the players as well, supporters, fans, everything. And yesterday you could see the way that he embraced the whole game and wanted to play well in front of for that jersey.
Yeah. No, he's exceptional, and you might have frozen on the brain there, Kuda, today. But anyway, he's been amazing, and we'll be interested to see how the Storm manage to start the year without Pappenhausen. They've slated in Nick Meaney at the back, but the club that everyone's talking about is Penrith, and it looks like you would not bet against them going 3 in a row, which hasn't happened since 84, I think it was, Parramatta, to win 3 premierships in a row. And the reason I say that is they've got a better nursery than you ever saw from Jamie Dury. It's unbelievable the amount of talent they've got through the grades. They won all 4 competitions last year, which is a rarity, and they just keep producing superstars, which isn't surprising given they're from the very area that GWS thought they'd have a crack at, which is 3 million people in Western Sydney. So,
Paul, with Penrith, you talk about the development and the nursery they've got, and they bring players in. They've had a lot of players that haven't been able to play senior football for them. But at the same time, this year, there's players that have left, and it's frightening to think that you're talking now about the possibility of winning 3 in a row in a competition that's, 1, brought in a new team, 2, that's seen a certain club that the professor supports try and become the reserve team for Penrith. It'll be amazing what happens if Penrith do win 3 in a row. And one of their most amazing stories in rugby, I would have thought.
It's very similar to the Melbourne Storm system of excellence. You've got Dylan Edwards, who won best on ground in the grand final. He's winning time trials as we speak in pre-season training against young players who would be at the fittest period of their life, not playing better than them necessarily, like in terms of trials, but just winning time trials. So those gut-busting ones where you run until you vomit, no one beats him. So that's the work ethic you've got there from the best player on the ground in the grand final. So that's the very work ethic that will ensure that the superstars don't just get there on talent, but they get there on dedication. And that's what scares all the other teams in rugby league.
Paul, just this last question on rugby league for today. Less than 3 weeks to go to the first game. The NRL say there was significant progress made during the week on the players' collective bargaining agreement. How certain are you that something will happen between now and the first round?
Well, the fact the noise has died down about any possible strike action, I'm pretty certain behind the scenes there's a fair bit going on, and I'm very confident that the season will happen. There's too much at stake for it not to, and I'm looking forward to Peter Volandis sitting down and then having a tie not tied up properly, announcing that in the near future that they've reached a deal. I just think there's too much at stake for them not to get in. Just going back a bit, there isn't a women's team planned for New Zealand, which is a shame. There certainly would seem to be the demand there, but that's not on the 4 clubs joining, which is Canberra, Cronulla, North Queensland and West Tigers. They're all very good rugby league areas, but you'd have to put New Zealand up there as well. So let's hope that happens in the future.
All right, let's have a look at the big event that's on TV tomorrow morning, and it's Sunday night in the US, the Super Bowl between Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. 2 Australians represented, which is terrific, both playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. A failed St Kilda footballer, Aaron Sipos, playing punter for the Eagles. Now, Judge, you're a St Kilda supporter. Tell us all you know about Aaron Sipos's career with the Saints.
Well,
question without notice.
This question without notice, and not a long memory, not a great memory. I'm not sure how many games Sipos played. You probably got the figures there, Professor, but if I said 30, would that be about close to the mark?
Well, I'll give you that, Judge. He played 28 games between 2011 and 2015, which is not bad for a pick number 75.
Yeah, well, look, he was a hard-working soldier like most St Kilda players are, not very good. The problem is we've got about 12 of them every year, and that's why we sort of end up where we are. But clearly he was destined for greater things and can I say more money playing in the other game.
Well, happily, Jordan Malata, who played rugby league for, guess who? South Sydney Rabbitohs, was said to be, what did I write down here? Too cumbersome for rugby league. Can you recollect him playing for the Rabbitohs?
No, but I did hear he's a bit of a song and dance man. He could be the world's biggest cabaret singer. Apparently he's appeared in some of those talent shows. I don't know how you'd fit him at a baby grand piano. He's about 6'20" and about 160 kilograms, isn't he? I think so. That's his side act. I certainly don't remember him playing for the Rabbitohs. I would have remembered the size, but I don't think that he ever troubled the top grades.
Giraffe, I think, when he sings at 203 centimetres and 166 kgs, you let him sing, don't you? You don't get any
166. I cut him short. I thought 160 was sizable, but you'd let him sing whatever he wants. He could sing Frozen all night, and we wouldn't get him off the stage.
The interesting thing with Jordan, Professor, was that he's not a punter, obviously at those dimensions. Didn't grow up playing NFL, and for him to be front row or the offensive front row for the Philadelphia Eagles are we understating the achievement that he's actually done as a sport? Like we saw Paul's mate Valentine Holmes go over to America to try and go to Disneyland, and obviously he missed out. But are we underselling the impact that Jordan has had on the sport, or how he's got there?
You've got to remember that the playbooks in that sport are about that thick. So it's not just pushing big guys around. It's very strategic and pulling certain ways, moving certain ways, playbooks. It's the fact that he's adapted to the game. And you've got to remember they have about 4 or 5 reserves, it seems, for each position. So he's made it to the top and he's done it pretty quickly.
Paul, in the paper,
I don't understand the game as well as you guys do, but isn't his role basically to protect the quarterback?
No, but also to open up running lanes for the running backs behind him. So there's no point him pushing 150-kilogram Stonehenge tablet to the right if that's where the running back's going to run. So he actually has to move very sizable objects certain ways, but also stop exocet missiles coming at his quarterback's head generally. So he has to be nimble enough to push in front, but also to hold back where needed and try and sense rushing threats.
Professor, I'm reminded of
the John. This is a bloke that doesn't touch the ball.
Yeah. Well, that's you're going for football.
Yeah, and he's the 14th highest paid of the 163 offensive tackles in the NFL, earning $10.2 million per season.
It's
not a bad for somebody who doesn't touch the ball.
For someone who doesn't touch the footy.
And plus bonuses from the quarterback, who, if he doesn't get hit, he no doubt slips him some, maybe some new guitar strings or something. Yeah. But I'm sure that he's pretty happy if he can keep his quarterback. You've got to understand, Judge, the opposing big guys literally want to kill the quarterback or at least knock him out, because if they do that, they win the match. So it's not that they just want to tackle the quarterback. They come with pretty fierce intent, and that's his role, is to stop them getting through.
Mark, it reminds me of the stat that if an American is aged between 20 and 30 and is over 7 foot tall, there's a 14% chance he's playing the NBL right now. So the NBA right now. There are certain people that are just born to play certain sports. And this guy sounds like, anybody was born to do what he does and only what he does in the NFL. He was almost predestined to do it.
Yeah. And build out a bit of Johnny Cash as well. So, yeah.
And right, Professor, the Kelsey brothers as well. You feel sorry for the parents, obviously having to wear half jumpers, but a great achievement by them as well. And they're both absolute stars in their own right.
Yeah, they are. Cooter, I was going to ask you for your prediction and why you think who you'll think will win or will win.
I actually go for Philadelphia out of the back of the Randall Cunningham years. So he was an absolute jet as a quarterback. And there's a little bit of him in, I would think, Jalen Hurts, the way that Jalen Hurts runs, he's rushing. So obviously I'll go Philadelphia. And normally the quarterback wins the best on ground, or whatever it's called, the Lombardi Trophy, whatever it is.
The MVP.
MVP, of course, sorry. Yeah. So I think the Philadelphia Eagles will be the world champions, as that's what happens. And probably I'll go Jalen Hurts as being the MVP. So it should be a great game. Obviously Mahomes is a little bit banged up, but he's paid the big bucks, and you'll see the reason tomorrow as well.
Paul, who do you think?
I think the Eagles absolute specials, and my recommended bet. And Gelding, what about this for a payoff? The guy's surname is Gainwell.
Yeah.
Like the first head of Star City was called Neil Gamble. I'm not making that up. Kenneth Gainwell to score a touchdown at any time. I'm not promising he'll go over first, but he's a battering ram type. I think the Eagles are absolute specials. So that's my little 20 cents worth. And Gainwell, gents.
Gelding?
Kansas City, Professor. They've got over this Cincinnati Bengals hoodoo that they had. Mahomes can become one of the greats of the game by becoming a multiple Super Bowl quarterback and MVP. I just think they've got the right game. For most valuable player, probably Mahomes, but Travis Kelsey, as Cooter said, their tight end, could be a chance to be, a bit of a roughie. But I do notice, and this is one for you, Giraffe, they're putting odds on how long the national anthem singing will the song will go for.
Oh,
Over
well.
100, over 127.5 seconds, it's $1.57, and over 127.5 seconds, it's $2.25. So I think we might gamble responsibly and get on the outsider at $2.25.
Who's singing it? That's important.
Chris Stapleton.
Chris.
Understanding.
Country and Western singer, they speak slower and they sing slower. Get on the overs. Yeah, Country and Western.
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh,
Stapleton was a singer in 2010.
All right,
So-
now listen.
and can I bet on him being in a big hat, Gelding? Because I want the super on that.
No. Chris, sorry, I was wrong there. Stapleton sang it in 2010.
All right.
And he holds the record at 127 seconds.
So who's singing it? Do we know?
No, I'm not too sure.
Gentlemen, just before we finish today, we need to talk about Australian cricket. Gelding,
Oh,
did you see that sort of performance happening for a team that's come off a very successful summer in Australia?
well, Professor, I thought we'd talk about Australian cricket and talk about a success story. The
Who's
Australian
Todd?
women.
Who's Todd Murphy?
Todd Murphy. Well, can we claim him as Sportsfan Radio's own?
Yes, we can. You
To
better explain to the
boys-
viewers.
To explain to the viewers, there's a bit of a connection there, and we're taking a very, very long bow here. Todd Murphy is a St Kilda player at the moment, where I was lucky enough to have a run many, many years ago. His father played at St Kilda in the successful sides in the 90s. Jamie Murphy was a very, very talented cricketer, but wanted to get back to Echuca area and that, and was a regular pick in the Victorian country sides when touring sides were coming out and play. But Ron from Port Arlington, when Ron was from Echuca, Paula Murphy was actually his secretary. So talking to Ron yesterday, he claims that he taught Todd many, many times how to bowl the offies in the backyard cricket game. And, well, do I claim been out to dinner with them on several occasions? So
Yeah,
there's a little connection there.
that gives you connection. So how good is 7 for 124, Gelding?
Well, rates him in the top 6 or 7 first game performances, best performance in the first game.
3.
Of course, no one beats Bob Massey, taking 8 for in 2 innings against England and things like that. But look, it was a very impressive bowling performance. You compare it with the off spinner they call the greatest of all time, and I think
Jason Crozier.
Hey,
Jason Crozier.
yes, the goat. Hey,
Well,
someone having the goat and taking one for 100.
It's just
20.
disappointing. It's just disappointing, Gelding, that he didn't get a chance to bowl a second innings because he probably would have had match figures of over 10.
Well, you would have thought so, but not a bad little effort raising the ball when you get the 5 wickets for your first test, and you got one of the best batsmen in Virat Kohli in there as one of your targets. So, I think all's looking good.
Gelding, can I put 2 names up to you? Scott Boland and Nathan Agar had similar raps after their. I mean, the bowling thing is just ridiculous. The amount of raps on that guy, but I just wonder whether this was a bit of a one-off. I mean, given as you say, he's got some magnificent batsmen. I just wonder whether it's a bit to do with the pitch. And I think Australia's got about 79 for the whole team.
Yeah. I'm with you, John. Look, he bowled well, but Indian hadn't seen him before. Yeah, he was an unknown kind of character and all that. These guys are the best batsmen in the world because they'll study him now and they'll look at him and they have any side that plays spin well, it's India. Their spin bowlers were fantastic. It'll be interesting to see second test, how he goes. He'll obviously play. Of course, I'm an Ashton Agar fan because he played at my local cricket club, but I think he will struggle over there too. We just haven't got the spin bowlers that they've got. And our batsmen have talked themselves either into the pitch or their spinners. They've just talked themselves into getting out. Like, Khawaja won the first slip. Warner was dropped the first slip before being LB for 10. Matty Renshaw, missed the ball by 6 inches. Hanscom again struggled. If Labuschagne and Smith don't get runs, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Golding, it's interesting that you talk about our batting because I believe, or from what I've read this morning, that they're going to look to send over a left-arm spinner now.
Right. Well, they've got one in Ashton Agar, but so, why not use a leg spinner?
Oh,
like Swepson.
They bowled loose bus change for a little bit, but I would have thought our batting was the issue. I would have thought our bowling, like, admittedly, they made 300 or whatever it was, but we dropped catches. Again, Steve Smith dropping a catch, second last ball of the day. It just was a bad test match in all aspects of the Australian team. The debutant obviously was a bonus, I would have thought. They would never have expected those figures, and if they say they did, then they're taking the P155. But Pat Cummins' bowling to start was horrendous.
Yep.
Scott Boland bowled a great line. He probably changed the way things were by tying up one end. It let the spinner do his stuff at the other end.
Yep.
But when your opening batsman can't get out of double figures or can't get to double figures, you're opening 2 for 0.
Well, we're 2 for 2 first innings.
Was our preparation any good? We were there for, I think, a week in Bangladesh before the first test. Is that the sort of way you prepare for a test of India?
Well, I think the positive thing...
No, but that's what cricket's like now.
Mm.
Right, they'll be going from India to England and they'll go from spinning wickets to seaming wickets without any preparation. These guys want to play in the big bash, and get their $250,000 like Steve Smith and Warner. They want to play IPL. They want to do this. They want to do that. I don't know, John. Best preparation, no. But if you're modern cricketers on multi-million-dollar contracts, you're expected to perform, aren't you?
Well, that's all very well, but don't expect us to be all over the Australian cricket team and say how wonderful they are when they get caught out on a wicket which they clearly weren't able to handle.
Well, I don't know whether it was a wicket. The Indians made 400. They didn't seem to have the same problems we had. And I look at David Warner in the first innings. He had a fault. He got caught on the stumps. His bat was at an angle. There was a hole in the pad. And after he'd been clean bowled and he stump over, the bat came in close to the pad and he moved forward. And then he left the ground looking at the pitch and shaking his head.
Ellie, I'm not criticising the pitch. I'm saying that there wasn't...
He just missed the ball. He's got a flaw in his batting over there, and India pick it up. They bowl around the stumps to him, and his bat and pads aren't together. And, his time may have passed. Khawaja was stiff in the first innings, I thought, with the LB. But the second innings, he was just sucked in by Ashwin. And Renshaw LB twice, for 2 runs in 2 innings, and you've got Travis Head sitting on the boundary line who was in fine form, and no one's actually explained to us why he was dropped. A poor record overseas. Well, if we're 2 for 2, does one of the openers go? Does Renshaw open? Travis Head's got to come in. Bowling, well, we need another spinner.
All right, Cooter, we'll finish with that and then we'll go to Gelding's racing, but we'll finish with your question.
Gelding, like this series is now over. I think we can agree on that. 1-0 down, we won't come back from here with what we saw in the first one. Is there a bigger issue with the Ashes, as Professor said, is there a bigger issue with the Ashes coming up and what we saw last time we were there, the way the English bowlers bowled to Warner, that we're going to go there and we're going to get smashed as well?
Well, as I said, a previous Australian coach actually said to us in a thing, and we were talking to him about it, said Warner shouldn't open in England. He should bat number 5. And that was 5-6 years ago. He said the Poms have figured him out. He makes more runs in the second innings than he does in the first innings over there, and his averages just prove that they've figured him out, and India have followed him. Bowl around the stumps to him. There's a gap between his bat and pad. Like he's made 10 in the second dig, but was dropped at first slip when he was 1. Again, we would have been, 2 for 10, and 2 for 10. Whereas in Australia, number 5 and 6 were coming in at 3 for 236 because Smith and Labuschagne were getting runs. But the Indians seem to be able to bowl very well to them. Interesting, Steve Smith being not out 25 when we make 91. So obviously we need, if these are Australia's best batsmen, surely they can hold up an end to him, can't they?
All right, Gelding, we better finish up your selections for today's racing.
Quickly, Professor. Also, one thing I noted, Professor, gone without much notice, Tiger Woods returning to PGA Golf this week in Los Angeles. So good to have, Tiger Woods. Big mention Sportsfan Radio before, so good to see him back playing. Professor, don't really like a lot today after a bit of a fill-up yesterday. But we'll go race 3, number 1, bankroll. In a maiden, round about the $5, so maybe a nice each-way bet, Professor. Then race 8, excuse me, number 8, Vanina Vixen, trained by Mar Eustace, ridden by Harry Coffey. It's a 3-year-old filly, won its maiden, moves up to a benchmark 58. Hopefully, again, round about the $4, $4.40. So hopefully that can get up for us or be a good place bet. But probably the main race today, Professor, the Hobart Cup. We like race 8, number 1, Spirit Ridge. Annabelle Neesham trains it to be ridden by Black Shin over there. So there's a couple just to have, I would suggest, just some minor each-way betting today for an interest, Professor.
Well, you can take a little bit out of what you won yesterday and put that towards it.
Well, Professor, let me just say to the listeners and also to the boys, pat yourself on the back for yesterday, Professor. You picked Pounding, ran race 8, paying $8.70 and $2.40. So bit of a fill-up day yesterday with Bauer. Again, Chain of Lightning we talked about before, a bit unlucky. And I'm thunderstruck. Well, yeah, Jamie Carr just got too far back on that. And the Group 1, very interesting yesterday, Professor. Group 1 decided on a protest and upheld.
Yes, unusual.
Very unusual. Interesting to see, Yeah, I thought they were a bit lucky to get it, but that was the decision of the stewards. Jack and I copped a bump from Gentleman Roy. Both horses were back before, Professor, so we liked both of them, and the stewards felt that the bump stopped Jack and I from going past Gentleman Roy.
Did they? Last one, Professor. Did they have the siren? Do they have the siren out at Sandown?
Yeah, the siren went. Yep.
Great.
Yeah, the siren still goes. Yep, for the protest. Very interesting. I don't know whether I'd be happy if I was the owners with the jockey Damien Lane, Professor, after the protest. Like Jack and O, which they've paid millions for, and it has burgundy colours, and things like that. of course, they presented the cup to him after the steward's room, and he's got the silks on the horse he's riding in the next race. In the photo. So maybe a bit of
probably because it took too long, Gilding, with the
maybe a touch up in the photo, but you would have thought before the photo's taken, he could have just whacked the silks over on top.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks very much for today's participation. And Paul, really great to see you back and performing well.
Thank you. I'm off, if you know what I'm saying, very shortly. Thanks.
And good afternoon to you.
More runs than